think about how you picture the aging process, If you were like most people, you probably have this deeply ingrained assumption that aging works, well, basically like the battery on your smartphone.
Yeah, that is the classic analogy.
Right. You start out at 100%, and year by year, you just lose a tiny, almost imperceptible fraction of a percent. It is supposed to be this slow, steady, incredibly linear decline into old age.
I mean, it is a narrative we've all internalized. We see aging as the slow march of time. The assumption is that biological decay is a daily drip, meaning, you do not wake up one morning and suddenly find yourself biologically older than you were the season before.
But the source material we are doing a deep dive into today completely shatters that battery analogy.
It really does. It flips it on its head.
We are looking at a groundbreaking study from Stanford University, published in Nature Aging, and the revelation here is going to change how you look at your own future. Aging does not happen on a slow, steady slope. It actually happens in sudden, violent bursts. According to this data, you literally fall off biological cliffs at very specific ages.
And the implications of that are just massive. I mean, the researchers behind this paper did not just look at a few health markers.
Right. This wasn't just a basic physical.
No, not at all. They gathered an unprecedented amount of longitudinal data to figure out exactly when these cliffs happen, what microscopic structures break down inside you during these periods, and why this requires a total rewrite of how we approach preventative medicine.
Yeah, and your own health span, really. So we are going to unpack the comprehensive data from a cohort of 108 participants in California.
Ranging in age from 25 to 75?
Exactly, to map out these specific biological drop-offs. And I think we need to start with how they actually figured this out, because they were not just giving people standard annual physicals and putting them on a treadmill.
Right, standard blood work wouldn't catch this.
The methodology is where this gets totally wild. They use something called multi-omics.
Yeah, and to appreciate the definitive nature of the study, you really have to wrap your head around the scale of multi-omics.
It's huge.
It is. When you go to a standard doctor's appointment, they draw a vial of blood and look at a few dozen markers, right? They check your cholesterol, your fasting glucose, maybe a basic white blood cell count.
Sure, usual stuff.
Well, this research team tracked over 135,000 biological features.
Wow. I just want to pause on that number for a second. 135,000 distinct features inside the human body?
Yeah, it's almost hard to fathom.
To do that, they are looking at the entire cascade of human biology. They started with transcriptomics, which is looking at RNA.
Right.
And if your DNA is the library of instructions, the RNA is the photocopied blueprint that gets sent out to the construction site, right?
That is a perfect way to put it. And then they moved down the chain to proteomics.
Okay, so what is that?
These are the actual proteins your cells are manufacturing based on those RNA blueprints. They are the physical bricks and mortar of your body. From there, they analyze metabolomics, which is the metabolic byproducts and exhaust left over from your cells doing their jobs, and lipidomics, tracking the complex fats moving through your system.
Okay, so blueprints, bricks, exhaust, and fats.
Exactly. And they even measured cytokines, which are the chemical messengers of your immune system.
And just to make sure they did not miss anything at all, they swabbed everyone's gut, skin, mouth, and nasal cavity.
Right, to track the microbiome.
Yeah, the trillions of bacteria living on and inside us. So they are essentially tracking the instructions, the building blocks, the exhaust, the defense systems, and the passengers.
Yeah, the entire ecosystem. And across all the participants, this generated over 246 billion distinct data points.
246 billion. That's just staggering.
It is. And when they fed those 246 billion data points into their statistical models, well, the first major finding upended the traditional model of aging entirely.
This is the battery thing we talked about earlier.
Right. They found that only 6.6% of the molecules in the human body changed linearly over time.
Meaning only a tiny fraction of our biology actually follows that smartphone battery drain model.
Exactly. A massive 81% of your molecules and microbes change non-linearly.
Wow. 81%.
Yeah. Their trajectories stay relatively flat and stable for years, and then in a very condensed time frame, they shift dramatically.
So if we move away from the battery idea, a much better way to visualize this is like driving a car.
Okay, I like that.
The traditional view of aging assumes your body is like a tire, slowly leaking air over 100,000 miles. But what this multi-omics data proves is that aging is actually like driving your car. Everything feels perfectly fine. The engine is humming. And then exactly at mile 44,000, the transmission just falls out onto the highway.
That is exactly what the data looks like.
Right. And you manage to patch it up, you keep driving, and then at mile 60,000, the entire electrical system fries simultaneously.
It is a great analogy, but to pinpoint those exact transmission drops and electrical failures, the researchers had to filter out a ton of noise.
Sure, because biological data is messy.
Very messy. So they used a specific algorithm called DESSWAN paired with a technique known as fuzzy C, means clustering.
Okay, let's translate those. Because fuzzy C means clustering. Sounds like you were trying to organize a collection of stuffed animals or something.
I know, the terminology is dense.
I imagine it's about grouping things that behave similarly over time, right?
It is, yeah. It is a highly sophisticated way of finding patterns in chaos. Instead of just looking at the average state of a person, the clustering groups together molecules that follow the exact same trajectory over time.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about DESSWAN?
The DESSWAN algorithm takes that further by separating everyday biological noise from permanent foundational aging transitions.
When you say noise, you mean like
the temporary spike in your metabolism because you just ate a heavy meal, or an immune flare-up from a poor night's sleep. DESSWAN filters that out so you only see the permanent shifts.
I do have to challenge the methodology here, though. Looking at the source material, the median tracking period for these participants was only 1.7 years.
That's right.
Some were tracked for up to 6.8 years, but still, if you are only monitoring someone for about 2 years, how can you confidently map a 50-year span of human life?
It sounds like a stretch, right?
Yeah. It seems like a massive leap to claim you found the timeline of aging based on a 2-year snapshot.
Well, the time frame of the data collection is exactly why the DESSWAN algorithm was necessary. Since they didn't track one person for 50 years, the algorithm uses sliding 20-year windows across the entire 25 to 75 age range of the group.
Almost like taking a series of overlapping panoramic photos to stitch together a full landscape.
Exactly. Think of a 20-year window, say from age 30 to 50. The algorithm analyzes the molecular profiles of everyone younger than the center point, age 40, and compares them to everyone older than 40.
Okay, I'm with you.
Then it slides the window forward by just 1 year, looking at 31 to 51, comparing them around the age 41 center point.
Oh, I see.
By stitching together these overlapping panoramas, they can see the overall timeline of human biology. And that specific stitching process is what revealed 2 massive crusts or waves of biological breakdown.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap before we jump off this first cliff. We are dealing with an incredibly dense data set, billions of data points tracking our RNA, proteins, and gut bugs.
Right.
The data shows aging is not a slow leak, but rather 81% of our biology operates on a cliff model mapped out through overlapping timeframes. Which brings us to the first massive drop-off.
Yes, the first wave.
If you are in your early 40s, this is where you really need to listen, because the first wave crashes right around age 44.
Age 44 represents the first major inflection point in human biology. The data categorizes this primarily as a period of profound structural and metabolic breakdown.
So let's get under the hood. What exactly is failing at 44?
Well, the cardiovascular system takes the most prominent hit. We see a massive spike in markers related to cardiovascular disease risk.
Just suddenly at 44.
Yes. The multi-omics data reveals sudden dysregulation in lipid metabolism.
And that's how efficiently your body processes, stores, and uses fats, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Alongside that, there are distinct changes in HDL remodeling.
Okay, HDL is typically known as the good cholesterol. It's essentially the garbage truck of the bloodstream, driving around picking up excess cholesterol and taking it back to the liver.
That's a great way to picture it.
So if HDL remodeling changes, are the garbage trucks breaking down?
They are. The structure and function of those HDL particles become compromised. They lose their efficiency at clearing out the bloodstream.
Not good.
No. Furthermore, the researchers noticed the activation of the complement cascade.
The complement cascade, what is that?
It is a complex part of your immune system that, when activated inappropriately, drives inflammation within the blood vessels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that accelerates plaque buildup.
So the cardiovascular engine starts running hot, and the exhaust isn't being cleared. But the structural breakdown is not just internal. The sources note that your skin and muscle stability essentially fall off a cliff at 44, too.
They do. The scaffolding of your body starts to give way. The data highlights profound dysregulation in the extracellular matrix, or ECM.
And the ECM is the intricate network of proteins and molecules that provide structural support to surrounding cells.
Exactly. In your skin, this network is heavily reliant on collagen and elastin. But at age 44, the study detected a sharp drop in glycosaminoglycan binding.
Okay, let's break that down. Glycosaminoglycans, or gauges, they are basically the biological sponges of your tissue, right?
That is the perfect way to visualize them.
They hold onto water to keep everything plump and hydrated.
Yes, and when JAG binding drops, those sponges dry up and flatten out. Tissue loses its hydration and elasticity.
So that's why the wrinkles suddenly appear.
Yep. Simultaneously, the data shows a disorganization of actin filaments.
Actin filaments.
These are the internal tent poles of your cells, giving them their shape and allowing them to move and divide. When the tent poles start to snap, the cellular structure sags.
Wow, so we physically start to lose our shape from the inside out. And I know muscle mass naturally decreases as we age, usually around 3 to 8% per decade once you pass 30.
Right, that's the standard model.
But this data implies it's not a steady decline.
Not at all. The breakdown of muscle structural constituents sharply accelerates right around 44. It is not just the slow 3% loss you might expect.
So what's happening?
The molecular instructions for building and maintaining muscle fibers become highly disorganized, causing the bottom to drop out much faster.
So your skin dries out, your muscles degrade, and your heart is under stress.
It is a rough transition.
And to make it worse, your daily comforts turn on you. The study points out a massive metabolic shift regarding how we process caffeine and alcohol.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. The specific molecular pathways and liver enzymes responsible for breaking down both caffeine and alcohol show a marked, sudden decrease in efficiency.
So you literally can't handle your coffee or wine anymore.
Exactly. The metabolomics data proved the exhaust from these substances was lingering much longer in the bloodstream.
I am looking at this list of 44-year-old problems, and I have to push back a bit here.
Go for it.
Is it possible we are just looking at the lifestyle of a typical 44-year-old masking as a biological cliff?
How do you mean?
Think about it. In your mid-40s, you are likely at peak career stress, maybe dealing with middle management. You have kids at home, you stop going to the gym, you start drinking more coffee to stay awake, and you pour an extra glass of wine at night to deal with the stress.
That's a very fair point.
I mean, if I double my coffee intake and stop working out, my metabolomics and muscle mass will look terrible, regardless of aging.
The researchers absolutely acknowledge that limitation in the paper.
Because it's hard to separate the two.
Yeah, very hard. Without continuous day-by-day behavioral tracking, like forcing all 108 participants to log every calorie and every minute of exercise for years, we cannot definitively untangle the decline in alcohol and caffeine metabolism from a generalized shift in lifestyle habits.
It is entirely possible the environment is pulling the trigger on some of these changes.
However, the sheer volume and depth of the structural cellular changes point to something much deeper.
Really? Like what?
Well, you cannot simply stress yourself into a sudden systemic disorganization of your cellular actin filaments. You cannot fake the fundamental shifts in HDL remodeling or the degradation of the extracellular matrix just by drinking an extra glass of wine.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Those are profound, localized biological shifts that strongly suggest an internal chronometer has gone off, even if a stressful midlife lifestyle amplifies the symptoms.
So just to lock in another quick recap here, age 44 is the physical cliff.
Yeah.
Your cardiovascular risk jumps because lipid metabolism glitches. Your biological sponges dry up and your cell tent poles snap, leading to skin and muscle degradation.
That's a great summary.
And your liver stops processing your morning coffee and evening wine efficiently. It is a highly structural breakdown.
It is.
But, returning to our car analogy, we patch the transmission, we keep driving, and then we hit the second cliff, the age 60 glitch.
Yes. If the mid-40s are categorized by structural and metabolic shifts, the transition at age 60 operates on a completely different level.
So what breaks down here?
This cliff is characterized by systemic, defense-oriented failures.
Let's start with the immune system, because the paper uses a very specific, slightly terrifying term, immunosenescence.
It is a heavy word. Immunosenescence refers to the deterioration of the immune system brought on by natural age advancement.
Okay.
The multi-omics tracking revealed that at 60, this is not a gradual weakening. There is a sudden, massive spike in immune dysfunction. Specifically, researchers saw severe dysregulation in the acute phase response.
The acute phase response.
Yeah.
That is essentially the body's emergency fire alarm system, correct?
Exactly.
It is how we react to sudden inflammation or a tissue injury.
Yes. When you suffer an injury or infection, the acute phase response sends a flood of specific proteins to the area to isolate the damage and begin repairs.
So what happens at 60?
At 60, this alarm system starts to glitch. It might fail to trigger when needed, or worse, it triggers constantly, creating a state of chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation.
Like a smoke detector that just won't turn off.
Precisely. They also recorded sharp drops in viral process regulation and antimicrobial humoral responses.
Meaning your body simply loses the ability to recognize and fight off new invasive pathogens.
Your internal defense grid basically goes offline, and the fire alarms are malfunctioning. And because the defenses are down, the internal machinery seems to accelerate toward disease.
What kind of disease?
Well, we see a precipitous drop in kidney function at exactly 60. The researchers tracked this via rising levels of blood urea nitrogen, or BUN.
BUN. Okay, and BUN is essentially the chemical exhaust created when your body breaks down proteins, right?
Exactly.
So if the kidneys are your body's oil filters, a high BUN level means the filters are clogged and the exhaust is backing up into the bloodstream.
That is exactly what is happening. The filtration rate drops significantly. Concurrently, carbohydrate metabolism takes a severe hit.
Which ties directly into sudden increased risks for type 2 diabetes, I assume.
It does. The researchers tracked this through fasting plasma glucose and HbA1c levels.
Just to clarify for everyone, HbA1c is a measure of how much sugar is physically stuck to your red blood cells over a period of months. It shows long-term blood sugar control.
Right. And when carbohydrate metabolism fails, that sugar accumulates. They also noted a sudden increase in phenylalanine metabolism.
Phenylalanine, what's the significance of that?
It's an amino acid, and its dysregulation is heavily linked to cardiac dysfunction and heart failure.
So the heart is taking a secondary hit at 60.
Unfortunately, yes.
But the sources also zoom way in, mentioning that cellular housekeeping begins to break down, what is happening at the microscopic level.
At age 60, oxidative stress reaches a peak. Your cells are essentially rusting from the inside out due to free radicals.
Wow, resting from the inside out.
Yeah. Furthermore, the way your cells process and stabilize mRNA, the very blueprints we talked about earlier, begins to fail. The instructions for building healthy proteins become garbled.
So the blueprints get smudged.
Exactly. But most critically, we see dramatic changes in a process called autophagy.
Okay, autophagy is one of those huge buzzwords in longevity right now. It translates to self-eating. But a better analogy is that it's the cellular Roomba.
I love that.
It is the body's way of sweeping up and clearing out damaged, misfolded proteins and dead organelles.
And when the cellular Roomba breaks down at 60, that biological trash accumulates inside the cell.
That sounds toxic.
It is. The cell becomes toxic, stops functioning, and turns senescent, essentially becoming a zombie cell that refuses to die.
Zombie cells.
Yeah, they just sit there and secrete inflammatory chemicals, driving further aging and disease in neighboring tissue.
Let's bring back our car analogy to cement the difference between these two distinct cliffs.
Let's do it.
If age 44 is the body's physical chassis, and the engine mounts wearing out, the skin sagging, the muscle degrading, the lipid metabolism struggling,
Right.
then age 60 is the internal computer and the deep defense systems glitching out. The immune fire alarms fail, the kidney filtration clogs up, and the cellular Roombas stop sweeping.
That perfectly summarizes it. The physical structure falters at 44, while the systemic management and deep repair mechanisms fail at 60.
Given how incredibly precise these cliffs at 44 and 60 seem to be across this 108-person cohort, the obvious question is whether this applies universally to everyone.
Right, which forces us to look at the nuances and the blind spots of the research.
Yeah, let's address the massive biological elephant in the room regarding the age 44 cliff, menopause.
It is the absolute first variable any scientist would scrutinize when looking at data shifting dramatically in the mid-40s.
Because menopause typically occurs between 45 and 55, bringing with it a tidal wave of hormonal shifts that fundamentally alter a woman's biology.
Huge shifts.
Doesn't that heavily skew the data for this mid-40s cliff? Are we just observing a profound female biological event and accidentally projecting it onto the entire human race?
The Stanford researchers anticipated that exact critique.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. To determine if the 44 cliff was just a shadow of menopause, they separated the data. They ran the complex trajectory, clustering the analysis, tracking the molecular paths over time, entirely independently for men and women.
And the men fell off the same cliff.
The results were stunning. Both the male and the female datasets showed the exact same transition points.
Wait, really?
Yes. Men experienced the identical cascade of breakdown in lipid metabolism, extracellular matrix degradation, and muscle loss around age 44.
That proves these biological cliffs are a universal human phenomenon. There is an underlying species-wide chronometer ticking inside both sexes that triggers this specific breakdown, entirely separate from female reproductive changes.
It is a fundamental truth of human biology, irrespective of gender.
That is fascinating. But we do need to talk about what this study admits it does not know.
Always important to check the limitations.
The limitations are significant here. First, a cohort of 108 people is not massive, and they were largely pulled from the area immediately surrounding Stanford University in California.
Which is a very specific demographic.
Right.
While the researchers ensured the cohort had diverse ages and ethnicities, 108 people from one specific geographic and socioeconomic bubble means the data might not perfectly represent the broader global population.
So you might look different elsewhere.
Exactly. If you ran this multi-omics tracking on a cohort in rural Japan or a Mediterranean island, you might reveal subtle shifts in exactly when these crests occur based on environment, diet, or genetics.
The other limitation that really stands out to me is the source of the data itself. The molecular insights are derived almost entirely from blood plasma and microbiome swabs.
Right, they did not take direct tissue samples.
Which begs the question, can we actually trust a blood draw to definitively tell us that the physical actin filaments in our biceps or the extracellular matrix in our facial skin are aging?
It is a highly necessary critique, and the researchers explicitly state that blood and swabs are indirect measures.
So it's a proxy.
Yes, but a highly accurate one. Blood gene expression often reflects systemic changes. If your skin scaffolding is degrading or your muscle is breaking down, the metabolic exhaust from that breakdown ends up circulating in your blood.
So blood is the highway catching all the debris from the broken cells.
Exactly. But they acknowledge that to be absolutely certain of the localized physical changes, future longitudinal studies will require actual physical tissue biopsies taken over decades.
So synthesizing everything we have unpacked today, we have two massive concentrated waves of aging at 44 and 60. They are marked by distinct physical and systemic failures, and they seem to be a universal human experience.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? Like, how does knowing about the transmission drop and the electrical fry change our approach to our own lives?
It necessitates a complete paradigm shift in how we handle preventative healthcare and health span management.
Because right now, the prevailing advice is just a vague, eat healthy, exercise, and slowly increase your medical screenings as you get older.
Which is fine, but this data suggests that a slow, linear increase in care is the wrong approach for a nonlinear biological reality.
Right.
If aging is a series of sudden drops, our healthcare interventions should be aggressively timed to those specific biological cliffs.
So instead of just a generalized healthy lifestyle, precision medicine could look like this. At age 42, knowing the cliff is coming, you specifically adopt a rigorous protocol to reinforce your extracellular matrix, hydrate your tissue, and medically stabilize your lipid profile.
Exactly. You prep the chassis.
You prep the chassis. And at 58, you aggressively shift your focus to target oxidative stress, support kidney filtration, and boost immune regulation before the system glitches.
It provides the ultimate blueprint for precision health. You do not just wait to get older, you actively brace for the cliff before you are forced over the edge.
And that reframing leaves me with one final, very provocative thought for you to mull over.
What's that?
If human aging is not an inevitable daily decay, but rather a sequence programmed to happen in these rapid, concentrated biological bursts. Actually, let me rephrase that. Does that mean the timeline is vulnerable?
Vulnerable how?
Could science one day figure out exactly what flips the switch at 44 and 60 and chemically smooth out or entirely block these molecular waves before they ever crash over us?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
Right. If aging is just a sudden glitch in the code, what happens when we learn how to patch the software?